Air Canada investors had a positive reaction last week to the company's third quarter financial results. The positivity came despite a declining financial performance on a year-over-year basis, although the quarter was notably impacted by a strike by the pilots union that led to uncertainty for travelers in late September. Whether this blip during what is peak season for the airline is an anomaly or the start of a trend remains to be seen. Guys, we're in the middle of earnings season. We're talking Air Canada, we're talking financial statements. Get ready if you're a shareholder and you want to know what's happening, because we're going to break it down. Let's dive in. Air Canada in the third quarter of 2024 posted top-line revenue of $6.1 billion, which declined by 4%, or $238 million on a year-over-year basis, which the company says is directly a result of lower passenger revenues. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Still, the company beat analyst estimates of revenue of $6 billion. While revenue was down, operating expenses were up by 3% or $137 million to $5.1 billion, with the company saying that higher costs were prevalent among most line items. Operating income declined by a larger degree, falling by $375 million to $1 billion, giving Air Canada an operating margin of 17% versus a margin of 22.3% in the year-ago period. Overall, net income for the quarter amounted to $2 billion, which includes a tax asset recognition of $1.2 billion, leading to diluted earnings per share of $5.38. On an adjusted basis, with that asset recognition backed out, net income came in at $969 million, with adjusted earnings per share of $2.57. Comparatively, in Q3 2023, adjusted net income came in at $1.3 billion, while adjusted earnings per share amounted to $3.41 per share, as Air Canada again exhibits their declining financial performance. Analysts had called for EPS of $1.62. So to Air Canada's credit, their $2.57 per share figure was a massive beat, and perhaps the reason behind the current rally. Adjusted EBITDA, meanwhile, came in at $1.5 billion, which was down from the $1.8 billion figure a year earlier. While adjusted EBITDA margin came in at 24.9% versus 28.8% last year. Net cash flows for the period improved by $329 million to $737 million, while free cash flow basically doubled, climbing by $147 million to $282. On the balance sheet side of things, total liquidity improved from $9.9 billion to $10.3, while net debt declined by $2 billion, dropping from $5.4 billion to $3.4. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the operational side of Air Canada in Q3. The company welcomed 12.6 million passengers over the 3-month period versus 11.6 million in the second quarter. On a year-over-year basis, that figure was basically flat. Available seat miles improved 3% on a year-over-year basis to just under 29,000 million, which is a strong improvement. It basically means that the company operated more flights, but it came in lower than the capacity increase guidance of 4 to 4.5% that Air Canada provided back in August, with the shortfall blamed on fleet constraints. And with the passenger numbers flat and available seat miles up, it's no surprise that the passenger load factor was down by 2.9% to 86.9. For viewers new to the sector, airlines also calculate something called CASM, which is short for cost per available seat mile. In the third quarter, Air Canada posted an adjusted CASM of $12.15, which was flat year over year. Finally, on the guidance side of things were a bit of a mixed bag as well. Air Canada had previously guided that available seat miles, or ASM, would improve by 5.5% to 6.5% versus 2023. That figure has now been reduced to an increase of 5%. Adjusted CASM, meanwhile, cost per available seat mile, is expected to increase by 2% versus prior guidance of 2.5% to 3.5%, which means that costs are coming in lower, which is obviously positive. Adjusted EBITDA is to be positively impacted by this, with prior guidance of $3.1 to $3.4 billion in positive adjusted EBITDA being bumped up to $3.5 billion. This guidance, however, was based on an exchange rate of $1.36 for every US dollar. So we'll see how that goes. The company at the same time indicated that they would be upping their efforts on returning cash to shareholders, announcing that they will repurchase up to 35 million shares under a normal course issuer bid. Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau commented that this buyback program is aimed at addressing some of the dilution experienced from financing decisions necessary during the pandemic and returning value to shareholders. This is actually funny because if I recall, didn't they promise that they weren't going to have high salaries and do any share buybacks when they got that big bailout package back in 2021? Yeah, they did. So they must have paid off those loans that they got during the pandemic, right? Oh, looks like they didn't. Now let's get into the social media response. Air Canada is Canadian. It's listed in Canada only. And as a result, well, you can probably imagine the investor discussion that exists. There ain't much. Like the results, the commentary was mixed, with commentators both calling it an airline in decline as well as having bad banger numbers. Maybe it just depends on your position in the stock. With the stock jumping, presumably on guidance and buyback news, the traders at least have been chatty on the topic. We've got Landry Luck saying that it's nice to see the stock return over $20, AG Stock Picks calling for another bull flag breakout, and Set Your Stop just basically putting the symbol with a picture of the chart. What could I tell you guys? This is basically the best it gets in Canadian FinTwit. But hey, at least executives are getting paid. The government's paying a whole bunch of the bills via bailouts, and they're getting their buyback. So shareholders are going to make money here, as we saw in the reaction in the stock price. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Are you long Air Canada? Do you have any thoughts? Let me know in the comment section. Also, if you haven't already, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I love you all.